"Don't go in, you won't want to see this," the maid said to the billionaire. Martha Collins had worked at the Royal Continental for 32 years. She had never disobeyed an order, never missed a single day, never raised her voice at anyone. But on that Thursday morning, when she saw William Harrison walking determinedly down the 8th-floor corridor, she knew she would have to do something she never imagined she was capable of doing. William reached the door of room 28 and raised his hand with the master key card. Martha stood in front of him, opening her arms as if she could physically block the man who had been paying her salary for more than 3 decades. He stopped, surprised by the boldness of that grey-haired woman who had always been discreet and obedient. "Step aside, Martha," said William, without raising his voice, but with that commanding tone he used when closing deals worth millions of dollars. "Don't go in, sir. Please. You won't want to see this." Her voice came out trembling but firm. William looked at the employee as if seeing her for the first time. Martha had tears in her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't move. She had known that man since he was just the promising son of the hotel's founder, long before he inherited the empire and multiplied the family fortune. William recognized her as the most senior maid, the one who had won 3 Employee of the Year medals, the one everyone respected. "What's going on here?" he asked, sensing something strange in the air. "Mr. William, I beg you. Let me explain first. But don't go in now." The businessman looked at the door of room 28, then back at Martha. Something was wrong, very wrong. He had received an anonymous call minutes earlier, saying only that he should check room 28 of his own hotel. The voice said nothing more, but the tone was serious enough to make him cancel an important meeting and come running. "Martha, I'm waiting," said William, crossing his arms. The maid took a deep breath. Her brown eyes, weary from so many years of hard work, looked at her boss with a mix of fear and determination. "Sarah is here," she said softly, almost a whisper. William felt the ground give way beneath his feet. Sarah, his only daughter. The girl who was supposed to be in Chicago closing deals with investors, preparing for a brilliant future. The young woman who, 3 days ago, had left with promises to return soon, but who no longer answered her father's calls. "What?" was all he could manage to say. "She's here, in the room, for 3 days." William took a step forward, but Martha didn't move, her arms still open, blocking the way. "Get out of my way right now," and his voice grew louder, harder. "Sir, listen to me first, please. I've known Sarah since she was 5 years old, remember? Your wife brought her here when she was organizing her birthday party at the Imperial Ballroom. She got lost and I found her crying near the laundry room. From that day on, whenever you came to the hotel, she would look for me." William remembered. He remembered little Sarah, always asking to visit Auntie Martha when the family came to inspect the properties, but that didn't explain anything. "That doesn't justify you hiding my daughter from me," he said, trying to control the anger that was beginning to boil. "I'm not hiding her. I'm protecting her." Protecting her from what? From me. Martha's silence was answer enough. William felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. His own daughter was hiding from him. The most loyal employee he had thought she needed to protect Sarah from him. "Martha, either you get out of the way or I'll call security." "Go ahead and call, sir. I'm not leaving, and if you fire me afterward, I'll accept it. But first you need to listen to me." There was something in her voice, a firmness William had never seen before. Martha was willing to lose her job, the retirement that was right around the corner, everything. For Sarah. The businessman felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Envy? No, something worse, realizing that an employee knew his daughter better than he did. "Go on then," he said, his voice coming out more tired than angry. Martha glanced around, making sure the hallway was empty. Even so, she lowered her voice even more. Sarah didn't go to Chicago. She ran away from the wedding. William blinked, confused. "What wedding? She's only engaged. The ceremony is in 2 months. "Exactly. And she doesn't want to marry James." The businessman felt the anger returning, but now mixed with something that felt like frustration. "Of course she does. She's the one who accepted the proposal. James Sterling is an excellent match. Traditional family, owner of one of the biggest construction companies in the state. This wedding will unite two important families and she doesn't love him, Martha cut in with a boldness that surprised even herself. Love? William almost laughed, but there was bitterness in the sound. Martha, of all people, you should know that marriage is about partnership, about building something together. Love is something from cheap romance novels. Then you didn't love Mrs. Elizabeth when you married her? The question slipped out before Martha could think better of it. His wife's name hung in the air like an accusation. William looked away. Elizabeth. The woman he'd married 28 years ago, when he was still just a young administrator trying to prove his worth to his father. The woman he'd loved intensely in the early years, before work, money, and responsibilities consumed everything. That's different, he muttered. Is it? Martha took a step closer, lowering her arms, but not moving away from the door. Or is it exactly the same? Are you doing to Sarah what your father did to you? William stared at the maid with wide eyes. How did she know? How did that simple woman who spent her days changing sheets and cleaning rooms know about the pressure he'd suffered at his own father's hands? About how he'd been forced to give up his dreams of being an architect to take over the family business? You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice came out weak. Yes, I do, Mr. William, because I saw it. I was here when Mr. William Harrison Sr. pounded his fist on the office desk, screaming that you would take over the hotel, or you weren't his son. I heard you crying in the lobby bathroom a week before your wedding. I saw everything, and now I'm seeing the same thing happen to Sarah. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing on. William leaned against the hallway wall, feeling weak in the knees. Memories he had buried for decades began to surface. His father, a hard and relentless man, deciding every step of his life. The degree he should pursue, the woman he should marry, the path he should take. He had sworn it would be different with Sarah, that he would give her freedom, choices, a life of her own. But when had he started deciding everything for her too? When had he become the very person he had hated in his youth? Is Sarah okay? He asked, his voice heavy with a concern he couldn't hide. Physically, yes. Emotionally? Martha hesitated. She's falling apart, Mr. William. Just like you were falling apart that day I saw you crying. The difference is, she had the courage to run away before it was too late. Running away isn't courage, it's cowardice. Running away from a situation that's suffocating you is survival. William ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he made when he was nervous. His mind worked quickly, processing the information. Sarah was right there, just a few feet away, hidden, afraid of him. The daughter he loved more than anything in the world was afraid of her own father. I need to talk to her, he said, but this time it wasn't an order. It was almost a plea. Not now. Martha shook her head. You're upset, she's fragile. You'll argue, and it'll only get worse. Worse? How could it get worse than my daughter hiding from me in my own hotel? Believe me, sir, it can get much worse. There was something in Martha's tone that made William stop. She knew something more. Something she hadn't told him yet. What else is going on? He asked, feeling a knot in his stomach. The housekeeper bit her lip. Her fingers nervously played with the navy blue apron of her uniform. William had known her long enough to know she was deciding whether or not to tell him the whole truth. Martha, I demand to know, he said, slipping back into his commanding tone. Sarah is pregnant. The world stopped. William heard the sound of his own heart pounding in his ears. Pregnant. Sarah was pregnant. His mind raced, doing the math. She and James had been together for 8 months, engaged for 3. It made sense, though he would have preferred they'd waited until after the wedding. But it wasn't the end of the world. Weddings could be moved up. Well, then we'll have to reschedule the wedding for sooner. James will understand. In fact, this only speeds things up and... It's not James's, Martha interrupted, the words rushing out before she could reconsider. William felt as if he'd been doused with a bucket of ice water. It wasn't James's, the fiancé, the perfect man he had carefully chosen for his daughter. The ideal son-in-law. Whose is it? The question came out as a growl. Martha took a deep breath. She knew this part would be the hardest. Michael's. Michael? Which Michael? I don't know any Michael. The driver, sir, Michael Turner. He's worked here for 5 years. William had to steady himself against the wall. The driver. His daughter was pregnant with the driver's child, an employee, a man who earned a modest salary, who had no college education, who had no important family, who had none of what William considered essential to be part of Sarah's life. That's impossible, he said, though he knew Martha wouldn't lie about something like that. It's true, sir, and before you say it's because of the family money, I know Michael. He's a good young man. He works hard, helps his sick mother, studies at night to finish his degree. He didn't know who Sarah was when they fell in love. When they fell in love? William repeated, incredulous. What do you mean? When did this happen? How did I not know? Because you weren't paying attention, Mr. William. Martha's voice grew softer, almost maternal. You were so busy building your empire, making deals, planning the perfect future for Sarah, that you didn't see when she started to wither. You didn't see when she stopped smiling for real. You didn't see when she met Michael and the life came back to her eyes. William wanted to argue, wanted to say Martha was exaggerating, but he couldn't. When was the last time he had truly looked at Sarah? Not just seen her, but really looked, really seen how she was feeling. When was the last conversation they'd had that wasn't about business, marriage, or social obligations? How long? He asked, his voice coming out hoarse. They met a year ago. At first it was just friendship. Sarah would come to the hotel to escape the pressure at home, and Michael was always available to take her wherever she needed to go. They talked during the rides. He made her laugh. He actually listened to her. And when did the romance begin? 6 months ago. She tried to tell you a few times. I would have remembered if she'd tried to tell me she was dating the driver. William shot back, but without much conviction. She tried to tell you she liked someone, that she had met someone special. But every time you were on the phone or had a meeting or changed the subject to talk about James. Until she gave up trying. Martha's words fell like hammer blows. William vaguely remembered Sarah trying to strike up a conversation a few times, but he always had something more urgent. There was always an email to answer, a client to attend to, a problem to solve. When had his priorities gotten so distorted? And James? She accepted his proposal. It wasn't me who forced it. Martha gave a sad smile. No, sir. You didn't force it. You just made it very clear that you expected that marriage, that it would be good for business, that James was perfect, that the Sterling family was important. Sarah thought that by marrying him, she would finally make you proud, finally be what you wanted her to be. I've always been proud of her. But you never said that, Mr. William. In 24 years, how many times did you look at Sarah and say you were proud of her for herself? Not for her grades, not for her social connections, not for her business plans, for her, for the person she is. The silence that followed was deafening. William had no answer because he knew Martha was right. He had built an empire, but he was losing the only thing that truly mattered. I need to see her, he said again, but this time his voice was broken. Will you accept her? Martha asked directly. The baby? Michael? Her choice? I don't know, William admitted, and it was the first time in decades that he had been completely honest about not having all the answers. Then it's not time to go into that room, Martha said firmly, because Sarah is in there devastated, thinking you're going to hate her, thinking she'll have to choose between family and happiness. And if you go in now without knowing what you're going to do, you'll confirm all her fears. William looked at the door of room 28 as if it were an insurmountable barrier. His daughter was in there, scared, pregnant, running from him, and he didn't know how to fix it. What do I do then? The question came out almost like a lament. First, you breathe, think, remember when you were young and had your own dreams. Remember what you felt when your father tried to control your every step. Then you decide whether you're going to be the father Sarah needs or the man your father was. It was a simple choice in theory, But William knew it was the hardest decision of his life. Decades of beliefs, of values, of absolute certainties about right and wrong were being challenged. He had built his entire existence on pillars that now seemed fragile. "Does Michael know she's here?" William asked, momentarily changing the subject. "No. He's searching for her desperately. He showed up here yesterday, asking if anyone had seen her. Sarah didn't want him to know where she was. She's afraid you'll do something to him." "Do what? I'm not a criminal." "But you're a powerful man, Mr. William. And powerful men have ways of making things difficult for those they don't like. Firing Michael would only be the beginning. Sarah knows that." William wanted to protest, to say he would never do such a thing, but he stopped. Wasn't it true? How many times had he used his influence to push away people he considered inconvenient? How many competitors had he crushed? How many employees had he fired without a second thought? And if he saw Michael as a threat to the perfect life he had planned for Sarah, what would he do? "I'm tired," he said suddenly, and he really looked it. His shoulders slumped, his impeccable suit looking too heavy. "I spent my whole life building, planning, fighting. And for what? To find out that my daughter is afraid of me." Martha felt her heart ache. She watched William grow up, watched him get married, watched him become a father. She also watched when work began to consume him, when the sparkle in his eyes was replaced by cold determination, when laughter was traded for urgent phone calls. "It's never too late to change, sir," she said softly. "Isn't it? Sarah already ran away. She already chose the worst I could be. No, she's here. If she had given up completely, she would have gone far away, to another state, another country. But she came to the hotel, to the place where I am, because she still has hope. Hope that her father can become the man he was before power and money changed everything." William closed his eyes. Memories began to flood in. Little Sarah jumping into his arms when he came home. Sarah at 8, proudly showing him a drawing she had made at school. Sarah at 15, laughing while he tried to teach her how to drive. When had those happy memories stopped? When had work become more important than those moments? "Does Elizabeth know?" he asked suddenly, referring to his wife. Martha hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Mrs. Elizabeth does know." "And she didn't tell me?" "She asked me not to tell you. She said you needed to figure it out on your own, that she was tired of trying to make you see what you were losing." It was like another punch. Elizabeth knew and had chosen not to tell him. His wife, the woman he had shared his life with for nearly 3 decades, was also tired of him. She had also given up trying to reach him through the walls he had built around himself. "How many people know?" he asked, imagining the scandal. "Only me, Mrs. Elizabeth, and Sarah herself know she's here, but her disappearance is already drawing attention. James has called several times. Her friends are worried. It's only a matter of time before the press starts speculating." James. William repeated the name of the fiancé as if it were an additional problem he couldn't process right now. "He'll sue. The business merger contract." "You're thinking about business right now?" Martha couldn't hide the disappointment in her voice. William opened his mouth to defend himself, but stopped. She was right. Even at that moment, his first concern had been business. Not Sarah. Not the pain she must be feeling, but contracts and commercial agreements. "It's all I know how to do," he confessed, a rare vulnerability showing through. "Solve problems, close deals, ensure stability. That's how I show I care, by building security for the people I love." "But Sarah doesn't need an empire, Mr. William. She needs a father." The words echoed in the empty hallway. William looked at his hands, hands that had signed millions of dollars in contracts, that had closed major deals, that had built a fortune, but hands that hadn't held his daughter with genuine affection in years, that hadn't dried her tears in years, that hadn't been available when she needed them in years. "How do I fix this?" he asked, and there was a desperate sincerity in the question. "Start by respecting her choice, by truly listening, by being present not as a businessman but as a father." "And what if I don't know how to do that?" "Then you learn, sir. The same way you learn to build an empire, you learn to rebuild your family." William was silent for a long moment. He could hear the muffled sounds of the hotel functioning on the lower floors. Guests talking, Elevators going up and down, normal life continuing while his world crumbled in that 8th-floor hallway. Is she okay? Physically, I mean, the pregnancy. He couldn't finish the sentence. She's 3 months along, a little nauseous, but that's normal. I've been bringing her food. Teas for the morning sickness. She's eating little but enough. You've taken care of her, it wasn't a question. William knew. Martha had always taken care of Sarah, more than he had many times. Someone had to, she said simply. The truth of those words stung more than any accusation. William thought of all the dinners he'd missed, all the school performances he'd skipped, all the times he'd promised to be there and wasn't. There was always a good excuse, always something too important to put off, and Sarah had grown up used to her father's absence. I didn't want to be like this, he said quietly. When she was born, I promised I'd be different, that I'd be present, that I wouldn't repeat my father's mistakes. You can still keep that promise, Mr. William. You're only 24 years late. There was a touch of humor in Martha's voice, but compassion too. She wasn't there to judge. She was there to protect Sarah, but also to give William a chance to be the father he should have been. Give me some time, William said finally. I need to think, process all of this. How much time? I don't know, a few hours, a day. I need to talk to Elizabeth. I need to understand how things got to this point without me noticing. Martha nodded slowly. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than an explosive confrontation right now. I'll stay here, she said, guarding the door, guarding her. Guarding her from me, William finished bitterly. Guarding you both from making decisions you'll regret later. William took one last look at the door to room 28. He had so many questions, so many things he wanted to say, to shout, to ask. But Martha was right. In that state, he'd only make things worse. Are you going to tell her I was here? He asked. I am. She deserves to know. And what will you say? I'll tell her the truth, that her father is trying to understand, that he didn't come in because he wanted to do the right thing. I'll give her the hope she still has. William nodded, feeling an enormous weight on his shoulders. He turned to leave but stopped after a few steps. Martha? Yes, sir? Thank you for taking care of her when I didn't. His voice was broken, heavy with emotions he rarely allowed to surface. Martha felt her eyes well up. I love that girl as if she were my own daughter, Mr. William. I'll always protect her. He nodded again, unable to say anything more without falling apart right there. Then he walked back down the hallway, each step heavy as lead. He stepped into the elevator, and only when the doors closed, when he was alone in that small, mirrored space, did he allow the tears to start falling. William Harrison, the man who had built an empire, who was respected and feared in the business world, who had more money than he could spend in several lifetimes, cried as he hadn't cried since his teenage years. He cried for the daughter he was losing, for the grandson he didn't know if he'd be accepted by, for the family he had let fall apart while building a fortune, and he cried because, for the first time in decades, he didn't know how to fix the problem. There was no deal to close, no contract to sign, no money to invest that could repair this. It was a matter of the heart, of human connection, of love. And those were tools he had forgotten how to use. When the elevator doors opened in the lobby, William had composed himself. He wiped his face, straightened his suit, put back on the mask of a successful businessman, but as he walked through the hotel's crowded lobby, greeting staff and guests with mechanical nods, a single question echoed in his mind. How had he become the man who made his own daughter run away? William left the hotel and got into the limousine waiting for him. Frank, his personal driver of 15 years, greeted him and asked where to go. William opened his mouth to say the office, as always, but the words that came out were different. Home, Frank. I need to talk to my wife. Frank looked in the rearview mirror, surprised. William never went home in the middle of the day. He always went straight from the hotel to the office, diving into meetings and commitments until late at night, but he didn't ask questions, just nodded and drove. During the ride, William stared out the window without really seeing anything. The city passed in blurs of buildings, cars and people, but his mind was in room 28, imagining Sarah there, hidden, scared. He imagined her face, probably thinner from worry and morning sickness. He imagined the tears she must have shed. He imagined the fear she must be feeling. And he imagined Michael, the driver, the man his daughter had chosen. William knew who he was, a tall young man with an easy smile, always polite. He vaguely remembered seeing him a few times but had never paid real attention. To William, employees were just that, employees. Faces that blurred together, names that didn't matter. But to Sarah, Michael was important enough to risk everything, to run away, to hide, to defy the family. What did that man have that William hadn't seen? What did he offer that all the money and status in the world couldn't buy? The limousine entered the luxury gated community where the Harrisons lived. The house was a 3-story mansion with immaculate gardens, a pool, a tennis court. Everything money could buy. But as William passed through the gate, looking at that property that had cost millions of dollars, he realized he had never felt at home there. It was just another asset, another property, another display of success. When was the last time that house had heard laughter? When was the last time the family had gathered there not out of obligation, but because they wanted to be together? He walked in through the front door. The house was silent, only the muffled sound of the housekeeper working somewhere. William went upstairs to the master bedroom. Elizabeth was sitting in the armchair by the window, reading a book. When she heard the footsteps, she looked up, surprised. "William, what are you doing home?" It was a simple question, but loaded with so much meaning. Elizabeth was surprised because William was never home during the day. Never home at night either, actually. He left before sunrise and came back when everyone was already asleep. "We need to talk," he said, and his voice was tired in a way Elizabeth hadn't heard in years. She closed the book slowly, watching her husband. Elizabeth was a beautiful 47-year-old woman, with brown hair beginning to show silver strands and attentive green eyes. She had been a promising lawyer when she met William, but had given up her career after marriage to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect hostess. "About Sarah?" she asked directly. "You knew." It wasn't a question. "I did. And you didn't tell me." Elizabeth set the book aside and stood up. She walked over to William, stopping a few steps away. "And what would you have done, William? Called lawyers? Tried to force her to marry? Used your money and influence to drive Michael away?" Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react in exactly the wrong way. You're my wife. You had an obligation to—" "Obligation?" Elizabeth laughed without humor. "My obligation is to our daughter's happiness. And she was slowly dying, William. Dying. You didn't see it because you weren't here, because you're never here. I was working, building a future for you. We didn't need more future, William. We needed you. Sarah needed a father. I needed a husband, not a ghost who left checks on the table." The words were harsh, but said without anger. Elizabeth was simply tired. Tired of pretending everything was fine. Tired of being the perfect wife to a man who was almost never around. Tired of watching her daughter suffer. "How did we get here?" William asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "When did everything fall apart?" Elizabeth sat beside him, keeping a safe distance. It wasn't just one thing, it was small choices day after day. The meeting that was more important than Sarah's piano recital, the business dinner on her birthday, the cancelled vacations, the broken promises. Little by little you drifted away and we got used to your absence. I thought I was doing the right thing. My father always said a man shows love by providing, by ensuring financial security. And were you happy in the marriage your father arranged for you? Were you happy working at something you didn't want? Elizabeth asked softly. William was silent. No, he hadn't been happy. He had resigned himself. He had accepted it. He had built success on a foundation of buried dreams, and now he was doing the same thing to Sarah. She's pregnant, he said, though he knew Elizabeth already knew. She is, by a man who truly loves her, who respects her, who listens to her. A driver, Elizabeth. She's the heiress to an empire, and she's pregnant with a driver's child. So what? Elizabeth stared at him. What does that matter? Do you love her any less because of it? Will your grandson be any less yours because of it? Or is your ego just wounded because she didn't choose the person you wanted? William had no answer. His hands trembled slightly. He had spent decades building certainties, creating rules about how the world worked, about what was right and wrong. And in one morning, all of it was being questioned. James is going to cause problems, he said, changing the subject. Probably. But James didn't love Sarah either. He wanted her last name, the connections, the access to her empire. It was a business transaction disguised as a romance. You knew that too. William, everyone knew except you. Or you knew and didn't care because it served your plans. The accusation hung in the air. William wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. He had chosen James precisely for those reasons, a man from a traditional family with businesses that complemented his own, with the right connections. Whether James loved Sarah or not was secondary. What mattered was the alliance, the merger, the growth of the empire. "What do I do now?" he asked, lost. "You go to that hotel. You talk to your daughter. You listen to her, truly listen, without interrupting, without judging, without already having all the answers on the tip of your tongue, and you accept her choice." "And what if I can't accept it?" Elizabeth was silent for a long moment. "Then you'll lose your daughter, William, and you'll lose me too. Because I'm not going to stay here watching you destroy what's left of this family." It was the first time in all those years that Elizabeth had issued an ultimatum. She had always been understanding, patient, waiting for William to realize his mistakes on his own, but now, seeing Sarah hidden away devastated, Elizabeth had reached her limit. "You would leave me?" William asked, genuinely surprised. "I should have done it years ago when you chose work over us for the 100th time, but I always believed that one day you would wake up, that you would realize what you were losing. But now this isn't about us anymore, William. It's about Sarah, and I'm not going to let you hurt her anymore." William looked at the woman he had married almost 3 decades ago. Elizabeth had always been beautiful, but at that moment, with the light from the window illuminating her profile, he saw something more. He saw the strength he had never really noticed, the determination that had always been there, but that he had ignored. She wasn't just the perfect wife who organized dinners and events. She was a complete woman, with dreams of her own that he had never bothered to get to know. "When did you give up on me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I didn't give up on you, William. I just learned to live with your absence. I found other things to fill the void. Volunteering, art classes, friendships. I built a life that didn't depend on you being here, because you never were. And do you still love me?" Elizabeth sighed, a weary exhale. "I love the memory of the man you were. The young man who made me laugh, who had dreams that didn't involve money, who saw the world as a place full of possibilities and not as a chessboard. But that man disappeared a long time ago, and I don't know if he still exists somewhere inside you." William felt something break inside him. All the achievements, all the millions of dollars, all the awards and recognition, none of it mattered. He had lost his wife's love in the process. He had lost his daughter. He had lost himself. "I want to be that man again," he said, and there was a desperate sincerity in his voice. "I don't know if I can, but I want to try." Elizabeth looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time in years, she reached out and held his hand. "Then start today. Start now. Go to Sarah. Be the father she needs." William squeezed Elizabeth's hand, that hand he knew so well, but that he hadn't touched with real affection in so long. He stood up, feeling a new determination. He didn't know exactly what he was going to say to Sarah, but he knew he had to try. "Come with me," he said to Elizabeth. "Sarah needs both of us." Elizabeth hesitated, then nodded. She stood up, and together they went down the stairs. But before they could leave, the doorbell rang. William opened the door and felt his stomach drop. James Sterling was standing there, accompanied by his parents, both with serious expressions. The rejected fiancé, heir to one of the city's most traditional families, did not look happy. "William, we need to talk," James said, his voice controlled but clearly angry. "Sarah is gone. She won't answer my calls. Her friends don't know where she is. I'm starting to think something is very wrong." William exchanged a look with Elizabeth. They couldn't just slam the door in the Sterlings' faces, but they also couldn't tell the truth, not without talking to Sarah first. "Come in," William said, stepping aside. "Let's talk." The Sterlings entered, sitting in the impeccably decorated living room. James's father, Richard Sterling, was a man in his early 60s, with white hair and an authoritative air. His mother, Victoria, was as elegant as ever, but with a hard line around her mouth. "Where's Sarah?" James got straight to the point as soon as everyone sat down. "She's dealing with some things," Elizabeth answered carefully. "What things?" "We're engaged. She should trust me, rely on me, not disappear without an explanation." "James," William began, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes people need space to think, to work through personal issues." "Personal issues?" Richard Sterling leaned forward. "William, let's be honest here. We have a contract. Our companies are going to merge. There are millions of dollars at stake, investors waiting. And your daughter just vanishes? That's not professional." "My daughter is not a business asset," William said, feeling anger rise. How had he never seen this before? How had he not noticed that James and his family saw Sarah exactly that way, as a transaction? "No one said that," Victoria interjected, trying to smooth things over. "But you need to understand our position. James loves Sarah, he's worried. The wedding is in 2 months. There are preparations, guests, everything organized, and she disappears without a word." "Maybe she has her reasons," Elizabeth said calmly. James stood up, clearly agitated. "What's going on here? You know where she is, don't you? You're hiding something from me." William watched the young man. James was 28, handsome, well-educated, from a traditional family. On paper, he was perfect, but looking at him now, William saw the same thing he should have seen before. A man more concerned with appearances and business than with genuine feelings. "Sarah is safe," William said finally, "and when she's ready to talk, she'll reach out to you." "That's not enough," Richard slapped the arm of the chair. "William, we need guarantees. The contract stipulates that the marriage must happen for the merger to be completed. If your daughter is having second thoughts—" "Then there's no merger," William interrupted. Silence. Everyone looked at William as if he had lost his mind. Richard and Victoria seemed shocked. James was dumbfounded. Even Elizabeth seemed surprised. "You can't be serious," Richard said slowly. "I am completely serious. My daughter is not a bargaining chip. If she doesn't want to marry, she won't marry. And if that means losing the merger, so be it. Do you know how much money is at stake?" Richard was red in the face now. "Signed contracts, commitments made. You can't just back out." "I can and I will if that's what Sarah wants." James stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "I love her, William. It's not just business to me. I really care about Sarah." William looked at the young man and for a moment believed him. Maybe James really believed he loved Sarah, but it was the kind of love that came with conditions, with expectations, with rules. It wasn't the kind of love Michael offered, free and unconditional. "Then you'll want her happiness," William said, "even if it's not with you." James's expression changed. The mask of concern fell, revealing anger beneath. "There's someone else, is that it? She cheated on me?" "That's between you and Sarah," Elizabeth intervened. "But I suggest you talk to her when she's ready, not demand answers now." "Demand?" James laughed without humor. "I'm her fiancé. I have the right to know what's going on." "You were her fiancé," William corrected. "Past tense, because something tells me that when Sarah finally talks to you, this engagement will be over." Richard stood up abruptly. "This is an insult. We came here with genuine concern, and this is how we're treated. William, you'll regret this. The Sterlings don't forget disrespect." "It's not disrespect, it's priorities, and my priority is my daughter, not your business." "Just wait until you see what our lawyers have to say about breach of contract," Richard threatened as he headed for the door. Victoria followed her husband, but James stayed behind for a moment. He looked at William and Elizabeth with an expression that mixed pain and anger. "I really did like her," he said quietly. "Maybe not the right way, but I did. And now? Now you've made me look like a fool." "It wasn't us, James," Elizabeth said softly. "Sarah tried to tell you several times that she wasn't happy, but you never wanted to listen." James opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. Something in Elizabeth's face, perhaps her genuine compassion, made him stop and think. Then he shook his head and left, closing the door harder than necessary. William and Elizabeth were left alone in the room. The silence was heavy, laden with the weight of what had just happened. "You just destroyed a deal worth millions of dollars," Elizabeth said, but there was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact. "I know. The Sterlings will sue." "I know. You could lose a lot of money. I don't care." Elizabeth looked at her husband with an expression he couldn't decipher. Then, slowly, a small smile appeared on her lips. "This is the man I married, the one who put people above business." William held her hand again. "I have 24 years of mistakes to make up for. Starting by not selling my daughter as a business asset seems like a good first step." "It's a great first step," Elizabeth agreed. "Now let's go to her. Let's bring our girl home." They left holding hands, something they hadn't done in years. In the car, William looked out the window, watching the city go by. But this time, he wasn't thinking about business or contracts. He was thinking about Sarah, about what he was going to say, about how he was going to fix his mistakes. When they arrived at the Royal Continental, William was surprised to see Michael, the driver, in the main lobby. The young man looked like he hadn't slept, with dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes. He was talking to one of the security guards, clearly trying to get information about Sarah. William stopped observing. Michael was about 25 years old, tall, with dark hair, wearing simple but clean clothes. Nothing that would draw special attention, nothing that explained why Sarah had risked everything for him. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Then Michael turned his head and William saw his eyes. There was something there, a sincerity, a genuine concern that couldn't be faked. The young man was desperate, not because he had lost an heiress or a comfortable life, but because he had lost the woman he loved. "Mr. Harrison," the security guard saw William and straightened up. "Can I help you?" Michael turned quickly, recognizing his boss. His face went pale, but he didn't look away. There was fear there, but also determination. "Sir," Michael began, his voice trembling but firm, "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but please, tell me if Sarah is okay. I just need to know she's safe." William studied the young man. He could fire him right then and there. He could make his life impossible. He could use all his power and influence to make sure Michael never found work anywhere again. That was exactly what he would have done days ago. "Do you love my daughter?" William asked directly. Michael blinked, clearly not expecting that question. "I do, sir. More than anything." "And the money? The social status? What comes with her?" "I didn't know who she was when we met," Michael answered honestly. "She told me she was just Sarah. She worked with events, traveled a lot. I only found out the truth 3 months later, when someone mentioned I was the driver of the Harrisons' heiress." "And when you found out, you stayed?" "I stayed. Because it's not the heiress I love, sir. It's Sarah, the woman who loves old movies, who cries when she sees abandoned animals, who wants to work with social projects but never had the courage to tell you. The Sarah who hides the fact that she sings really well because she's embarrassed. That's the woman I love." William felt a tightness in his chest. Michael knew things about Sarah that he himself didn't know. His driver knew his daughter better than he did. "She's pregnant," William said, watching Michael's reaction. The young man's eyes widened. Surprise, then joy, then fear. "Really? Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" The questions came out in a rush. "She is. They both are. But she's scared. Scared of me." Michael looked away, but William continued. "Does she have reason to be scared? Of what I can do to you?" The silence that followed was tense. Michael seemed to be weighing his words. "I would understand, sir. If you fire me, if you keep me away from her. I understand that I'm not what you wanted for Sarah. But I want you to know that I'll take care of her and the baby, no matter what happens. I'll work wherever I need to, do whatever it takes. I won't abandon her, even if it means losing everything. Sarah is everything to me, sir, so I lose nothing as long as I have her." Elizabeth, who had been watching in silence, felt her eyes well up. She gently touched William's arm. "Does he remind you of someone?" she whispered. William looked at Elizabeth, confused. Then he understood. Michael reminded him of himself when he was young, when he was in love with Elizabeth and didn't care that her family was more important than his, when he was willing to face the world for her. When had he forgotten that feeling? When had love become secondary to business? "Sarah is on the 8th floor," William said finally. "Room 28. Martha Collins is guarding the door. Tell her I sent you up." Michael stood still for a second, as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. "Sir, go, before I change my mind." The young man didn't need to be told twice. He muttered a hurried, "Thank you," and ran toward the elevators. William and Elizabeth watched him get in and the doors close. "Are you sure about this?" Elizabeth asked. "No," William admitted, "but I'm trying to do the right thing, even without being sure." They waited a few minutes before going up as well, giving Michael time to get there first. On the 8th floor they found Martha still in front of the door to room 28. But now there were voices on the other side, muffled by the door, but clearly emotional. Martha saw William and Elizabeth, her face showing surprise. "Sir, ma'am," she greeted. "Michael just went in." "I know. I sent him." Martha smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "You're doing the right thing." "I'm trying," William replied. "I still don't know if I'm pulling it off, but I'm trying." From inside the room they heard crying, not from sadness but from relief. Sarah crying in Michael's arms, probably. Elizabeth squeezed William's hand. "Let's wait a little," she suggested. "Let them have this moment." They sat in the hallway on those same chairs that were usually empty. Martha went to get water for everyone, and they stayed there, 3 people from different generations and walks of life, united by their concern for Sarah. "Martha," William said after a while, "why did you do it? Why did you risk everything for Sarah?" The grey-haired housekeeper looked at him with those brown eyes that had seen so many things over the years. "Because someone had to, Mr. William, and because I know what it's like to love a child who isn't yours. I could never have children. That was the greatest pain of my life. But Sarah, since she was little, she needed someone, and I needed to be needed. It was a gift life gave me." William felt a lump in his throat. Martha had loved Sarah in a way he himself hadn't been able to, unconditionally, without expecting anything in return, without trying to mold the girl into what she thought she should be. "You were more of a mother to her than I was a father," he admitted. "Don't say that, sir. It's never too late to start over. Sarah needs her father. She always has. It's just that now, for the first time, you're truly here. Present, not just physically but emotionally too." Martha's words echoed. Present. That's what had been missing all those years. William could buy all the gifts, pay for the best schools, give Sarah everything money allowed. But he'd never given her what mattered most: his presence, his time, his true attention. The door to room 28 opened slowly. Michael came out first, his eyes red from crying. He looked at William and Elizabeth, then at Martha. "She wants to see you," he said, his voice hoarse. "She's scared, but she wants to." William stood up, feeling his legs tremble. He had been Sarah's father for 24 years, but at that moment, walking toward that hotel door, he felt as if he were meeting her for the first time. The room was simple, a standard hotel room. Sarah was sitting on the bed, wrapped in a blanket despite the heat. She was thinner, deep dark circles under her eyes, brown hair tied in a messy ponytail. When she saw William, her entire body went tense. "Dad," she said, and that single word was laden with so much fear, so much uncertainty. William stopped at the bedroom doorway. He had rehearsed mentally what he was going to say, but now, seeing his daughter like this, small and frightened, all the words slipped away. "Sarah," was all he managed to say. Elizabeth walked past William and sat on the bed beside her daughter, wrapping her in a hug. Sarah broke down, crying in her mother's lap like she hadn't since she was a child. William stood there frozen, feeling useless. "I'm so sorry, Dad," Sarah said between sobs. "I'm sorry for everything, for running away, for hiding, for disappointing you. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't marry James knowing it was a lie. Knowing I was betraying myself every day, I pretended everything was fine." "You don't have to apologize," William said, his voice coming out stronger than he expected. "I'm the one who should apologize, for not paying attention, for not seeing how much you were suffering, for planning your life without asking what you wanted." Sarah looked up, surprised. Those weren't words she expected to hear from her father. "But the wedding, the business, everything you planned—" "None of it matters," William interrupted. "None of it matters if you're not happy. It took me too long to realize that. But now I do. And I'm going to do better. I'm going to try to be the father you deserve." "Do you know about—" Sarah placed her hand over her belly, still flat. "I know about the baby, about Michael, about everything. And you're angry." William walked over to the bed and knelt beside Sarah, something he hadn't done since she was little. He held his daughter's hand. "I'm not angry, Sarah. I'm ashamed. Ashamed that I failed so badly as a father that you felt you had to run away, that you had to choose between your family and your happiness." Tears began to fall down Sarah's face again. "I thought you would hate me, disown me, do something terrible to Michael." "And I almost did," William admitted honestly. "When I found out, my first reaction was rage. It was wanting to control, to fix, to get things back on the original plan. But then Martha made me see something." "Martha?" Sarah looked toward the door, where the housekeeper was watching discreetly. "She reminded me of who I was before I became this," William said, gesturing vaguely at himself. "Before I let money and power change who I was. She reminded me that I was once young and in love too, that I also suffered under the decisions of a controlling father, that I swore I would never do to my children what was done to me." "But you did," Sarah said softly. "I know, and I'm sorry, more than any words can express." Elizabeth held her daughter tighter, crying too now. Michael stood at the door, unsure whether he should come in or give the family privacy. It was Sarah who reached out her hand to him. "Michael, come," she asked. "You're part of this." The young man hesitated, looking at William. The businessman nodded, giving silent permission. Michael walked in and stood beside Sarah, his presence clearly giving her strength. "Dad, I love him," Sarah said, clutching Michael's hand. "I know it wasn't what you wanted, that it wasn't the plan. But I love him in a way I've never felt for anyone. He sees me, Dad, really sees me. Not the heiress, not William Harrison's daughter, just Sarah. And with him I can just be myself." William looked at Michael, at the way the young man held Sarah's hand, protective but gentle, at the way he looked at her, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. It was the same way William used to look at Elizabeth in the beginning, before responsibilities and work dimmed that spark. "Michael," William said, his voice serious, "do you know what you're getting into? Being part of this family isn't easy. There are expectations, pressures, judgmental eyes. My daughter comes with complicated baggage, most of it my fault." "Sir, with all due respect," Michael replied, his voice steady despite the obvious nervousness. "I don't want to be part of your empire. I just want to be part of Sarah's life and our child's. I'll work hard. I'll provide for them the best I can. It may not be the way you're used to, but it'll be honest and with love. And when the money runs out, when the reality of having a baby hits, when Sarah can't have the luxuries she's always had, then we'll be happy without the luxuries," Michael said simply. "Sarah already told me she'd rather live in a small apartment and be happy than live in a mansion and be miserable. And I believe her." William fell silent, processing. Part of him wanted to test him, to see if Michael truly loved Sarah or if it was just pretty talk. But another part, the part that was beginning to emerge after being buried for decades, recognized the sincerity in the young man. "Sarah," William turned his attention to his daughter, "what do you want? Truly, not what you think I want to hear. not what seems like the right thing. What do you really want out of life? Sarah was taken aback by the question. No one had ever asked her that before. I want, she began hesitantly. I want to marry Michael. I want to have this baby. I want to work with social projects, help people. I want to sing even if it's not professionally. I want a life that's mine, not a script written by someone else, and I want, her voice faltered, I want you to be in that life, Dad. Not as a businessman, not as the William Harrison everyone knows, but as my father. William felt something breaking and rebuilding inside him at the same time. Sarah wanted simple things, love, meaningful work, creative expression, and she wanted him back, but only if he could be real. I'll be there, he promised. I don't know how to be that kind of father yet. I spent so long being the other kind that I forgot. But I'll learn. I'll mess up, probably many times. But I'll be here. Present. For real. Sarah threw herself into her father's arms, something she hadn't done in years. William held her, feeling how fragile she was, how much weight she'd lost from the stress of the past few weeks, and he promised himself he would make up for all those lost years. Elizabeth watched the scene with tears streaming down her face. Martha, still by the door, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even Michael had misty eyes. There's one thing I need to know, William said when they finally pulled apart from the embrace. Why here? Why this hotel, this specific room? Sarah gave a small smile, the first since William had walked in. Remember when I was 10 and we came to inspect the hotel after the renovation? You were busy and I got bored. Martha showed me all the rooms. Let me pick my favorite. This one, room 28, had the best view. You could see the park, the trees. I said that when I grew up, I was going to live in a place with that view. Martha promised she'd always keep this room special for me. William looked at Martha, who confirmed with a nod. All these years, sir, I never let this room go into the regular booking system. I always kept it available, in case Sarah needed it. And she did. You've taken care of her better than I have, William said, his voice filled with gratitude and shame mixed together. No, sir. I was just here when she needed me. But now you're here. That's what matters. A comfortable silence fell over the group. It wasn't the end of their problems, William knew. There were still James and his family threatening lawsuits. There was the judgmental society that would whisper about the heiress pregnant by the driver. There was a business empire that had just lost a major merger. There was so much to resolve, so much to face. But at that moment, in room 28 of the Royal Continental, with his family gathered around him, William Harrison felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. So, Elizabeth said eventually, ever the practical one, what do we do now? We can't stay in this room forever. We go home, William said. All of us. Sarah, Michael, you'll stay with us while we sort things out, while we plan the future the right way. The way you want. Dad, you don't have to— Yes, I do, William interrupted. Let me do this. Let me prove I'm serious about changing. Sarah looked at Michael, who shrugged, leaving the decision to her. Okay, she agreed, but with one condition. What? You cancel all your meetings tomorrow, and we spend the day together. You, me, Mum. Talking, really talking. No phones, no emails, no work, just family. William opened his mouth to say he had important meetings, urgent business. But then he stopped. That was exactly the problem. There was always something more important. There was always an excuse. All right, he agreed, and saw Sarah's face light up. Actually, I'll cancel the whole week. We're going to need more than a day to make up for 24 years. Sarah smiled, a genuine smile William hadn't seen in years. Elizabeth kissed the top of her daughter's head. Michael seemed unable to believe it was all happening. Martha wiped away tears silently, but before they could move, William's phone rang. He was going to ignore it, but he saw who it was. His lawyer. Sorry, I need to take this, he said, stepping out into the hallway. William, we have a problem. The lawyer's voice was tense. Richard Sterling just filed a lawsuit. He's seeking damages for breach of contract. $5 million. And he's leaking to the press that Sarah ran away, that she's seeing someone else, that she's pregnant. He wants to destroy her reputation. William felt the anger return, But this time it was different. It wasn't anger at Sarah or Michael. It was anger aimed at the one who deserved it. "Prepare a countersuit," he said firmly. "And prepare a statement to the press. We're going to tell our side of the story. Sarah won't be defamed, not as long as I can stop it." "William, are you sure? This is going to become public, very public. There will be speculation, judgment." "I know, but my daughter won't carry shame for whatever they say. She made the right choice for herself, and I'm going to support her publicly." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You've changed," the lawyer said, surprised. "In all the years I've worked for you, I've never seen you put family ahead of protecting your corporate image." "People change," William replied, "or at least they should. And I'm 24 years late." When he returned to the room, everyone looked at him with concern. "The Sterlings are suing and leaking to the press," he explained. "It's going to get ugly." "Then maybe I should stay hidden," Sarah said, the fear returning to her eyes. "No," William said firmly. "No, you're not going to hide. We're going to face this together, as a family. And anyone who has a problem with your choices can come talk to me." Sarah looked at her father as if seeing him for the first time. This wasn't the cold, calculating William Harrison she had known her whole life. This was someone different, someone she wanted to get to know better. They left room 28 together. Martha locked the door, promising to always keep the room special. In the elevator, heading down to the ground floor, William held Sarah's hand on one side and Elizabeth's on the other. Michael was right behind them, still not quite believing he hadn't been kicked out or threatened. In the hotel lobby, some guests recognized William and Sarah. The whispers and stares began. William saw when one of them took a photo with their phone. The story would be on the internet before they even got home. But he didn't let go of his daughter's hand. He did not quicken his pace out of shame. He walked with his head held high, showing the world that he stood by Sarah, no matter what came next. In the car, William sat beside Sarah in the back seat, while Elizabeth rode in the front and Michael drove. It was strange having the young man as a driver after everything, but it also seemed right in some way. "Michael," William said as they left the parking lot, "do you still want to work as a driver?" The young man looked in the rearview mirror, confused. "Sir?" "It's honest work, don't get me wrong. But if you're studying business administration, maybe you want something different, something that puts your education to use." I'm still finishing my degree, sir. 2 semesters left. How about coming to work at the office? Nothing important at first, but you can learn how things work. If you really like it, you can grow. If you don't, at least you'll have the experience on your resume." Michael almost hit the car out of surprise. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to prove yourself. I won't give you anything for free just because you're with my daughter. But I will give you a chance, a fair chance." Sarah squeezed her father's hand, her eyes shining. "Dad, you don't have to." "I want to," William said. "If Michael is going to be part of this family, then he deserves the chance to build something of his own too, not dependent on me, but with some initial help. It's the least I can do." I don't know what to say, sir," Michael said, visibly moved. "Don't say anything. Just show up Monday morning, ready to work." The rest of the ride was spent in comfortable silence. When they arrived at the mansion, William saw that there were already a few photographers at the gate. News travelled fast. He ignored them, going straight in. Inside the house, the maid, Rose, was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked surprised to see Sarah, then Michael, then went back to work without asking questions. It was the kind of discretion William had always valued. "Rose," William called to her, "prepare the guest room for Michael. He'll be staying here for a while." The maid nodded without showing any surprise. After decades of working for the Harrisons, she had learned to simply accept and adapt. Sarah gave Michael a quick tour of the house. Elizabeth went to rest, emotionally drained from everything. And William found himself alone in the living room, looking at the family photos scattered around. There was one of Sarah at 5 years old, smiling with her 2 front teeth missing. Another at 12, on the day of her elementary school graduation. One at 15, too serious for her age, already showing signs of the weight she carried. And the most recent one from the engagement party with James, where Sarah was smiling, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. William picked up that last photo and really looked at it. How had he not seen it? How had he not noticed that the smile was fake, that her eyes were sad, that his daughter was unhappy? It was all there, obvious, but he had been so focused on the success of the event, on the union of the families, on business, that he hadn't seen it. He put the photo back, face down. It wasn't a memory worth preserving. "Dad?" Sarah appeared at the door. "Are you okay?" "I'm thinking," he admitted, "about all the things I lost because I wasn't paying attention." Sarah sat down beside him on the couch. "You don't need to keep dwelling on your mistakes. You're here now. That's what matters." "Is it enough? Just being here now?" "I don't know," Sarah said honestly, "but it's a start. And I'm willing to give you that chance if you're willing to really try." "I am," William promised. "Sarah, I know I'm still going to mess up. I'm going to have moments where the old me resurfaces, where I'll want to control, plan, decide for you. When that happens, I want you to tell me, correct me, remind me to be better. Deal. But you also have to tell me things about yourself, about your life before me, about what it was like when you were my age." "My life before you?" William laughed without humor. "It wasn't very different from yours now. My father controlled everything. I had other dreams. I wanted to be an architect, can you believe it? I loved drawing buildings, imagining spaces. But my father said it was a waste of time, that I had a responsibility to the family business." "You never told me that," Sarah said, surprised. "I never told anyone, not even your mother, I think. I just buried that dream and focused on what was expected of me, and I was good at it. I built the empire my father wanted. I became the man he expected me to be. But in the process, I lost the man I was." "Do you still draw?" Sarah asked softly. William shook his head. "I stopped when I was 22. After I got married and officially took control of the business, I threw away all my drawings, told myself it was time to grow up." "That's so sad, Dad." "It is, and I didn't want that for you. But without realizing it, I was doing exactly the same thing, shaping you into what I thought you should be, not what you wanted to be." Sarah was silent for a moment. "You know what we could do? When things settle down, you could start drawing again. Not professionally, but as a hobby, as something that makes you happy. I don't even know if I still can. Then we'll relearn together. I can learn to sing without being ashamed, and you can learn to draw without guilt." William looked at his daughter, seeing the strong, compassionate young woman she had become despite him, not because of him. "When did you become so wise?" "I had a good teacher," Sarah smiled. "Martha taught me a lot over the years, about being strong even when you feel weak, about making hard choices, about truly loving. Martha is a special woman. She is, and you need to appreciate her better, raise her salary, give her better benefits. She spent 3 decades being loyal to our family, often sacrificing her own personal life." "You're right," William agreed. "I'll talk to HR tomorrow. Actually, I'll promote her. She can be manager of the entire hospitality department if she wants." "She'll refuse," Sarah laughed. "Martha loves what she does. She loves taking care of the rooms, being close to the guests. But a good salary and a decent retirement plan would be great." William made a mental note. There was so much to do, so many things to fix. But for the first time, he felt he was on the right path. Michael came back after a while, looking uncomfortable in the luxurious mansion. "It's so big," he commented. "Our entire house would fit in just the living room." "You'll get used to it," Sarah said, taking his hand. "I don't know if I want to get used to it," Michael admitted. "I don't want this kind of wealth to change who I am." "It won't," William said. "Not if you don't let it. And Sarah will keep you grounded, I'm sure." They had dinner together, the 4 of them. It was awkward at first, too formal, but gradually the conversation flowed. Elizabeth told stories from her youth, from when she met William. Sarah talked about her plans to work with social projects, specifically helping young single mothers. Michael shared about his mother, a strong woman who had raised him alone after his father abandoned them when he was little. "I want to meet your mother," William said suddenly. Michael almost choked on his food. Mr. William? If you're going to be part of this family, then your mother is too. I want to meet her, see where you came from, understand who shaped you. She's not like you, Michael warned. She lives in a simple neighborhood, works as a seamstress, has no formal education beyond elementary school. And? William asked. Does that make her any less? From what you've told me, she raised you alone, sacrificing everything for you. That deserves more respect than any college degree. Lucas looked at Sarah, who smiled encouragingly. She's going to love meeting you, he finally said. But she's going to be nervous. She'll want to clean the house 1,000 times before you arrive. Then we'll go tomorrow, William decided. Surprise her. That way she won't have time to get nervous. Dad, Sarah laughed, you can't just show up at people's houses without warning. Why not? That's what I'm doing from now on, being spontaneous, living without a schedule. Elizabeth almost choked on her wine. Who are you, and what have you done with my husband? I changed, William said simply. Or I'm trying to. I haven't fully gotten used to the idea yet, but I'm trying. After dinner, Sarah went upstairs to take a shower. Lucas went to the guest room, still processing everything that had happened, and William and Elizabeth were alone for the first time since morning. Are you really going to cancel the week of meetings? Elizabeth asked as they got ready for bed. I am. I already emailed my secretary. Everything's been rescheduled. William Harrison, the workaholic, cancelling an entire week of work. Elizabeth shook her head in disbelief. I never thought I'd see the day. Neither did I, he admitted. I'm terrified, actually. I don't know how to spend a week without work. I don't know what to do with so much free time. You rest, you talk to your family, you rediscover hobbies, you live. It sounds so simple when you put it that way. It is simple, William. We're the ones who complicate things. They lay down, each on their own side of the bed. There was a space between them, a space that had grown over the years. William looked at that space, that physical void that represented the emotional void that had developed. Elizabeth? Yes? Can I hold you? There was a moment of silence. Then Elizabeth turned and moved closer, filling the space. William wrapped his arms around her, feeling how perfectly she fit there, how she always had. I missed you, he confessed in the dark. I've always been here. I know. I'm the one who was absent. Elizabeth didn't respond, just snuggled closer. And for the first time in years, William fell asleep truly holding his wife, feeling connected again. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out, as we're just getting started. Now, continuing. The next morning, William woke up before the alarm, a habit of decades. But instead of heading straight to the office, he stayed in bed watching Elizabeth sleep. When was the last time he'd done that? When was the last time he'd had time to simply exist without a schedule pressing down on him? Elizabeth opened her eyes and caught him looking. Good morning, she said, still sleepy. Good morning, you're beautiful. I just woke up, I'm a mess, she laughed. Even so. Actually, you've always been beautiful. I just forgot to notice. Elizabeth grew serious. William, I need to know. This change, is it real? Or is it just going to last until you get used to Sarah's situation, and then you go back to normal? It was a fair question. William knew that. I don't know, he answered honestly. I want to believe it's real. I want to believe I've finally woken up, but I'm afraid it's just temporary, that little by little I'll slip back into old habits without realizing it. Then don't let it happen, Elizabeth said firmly. When I see you slipping back, I'll let you know. When Sarah sees it, she'll let you know. We'll keep you accountable. But you have to want it. Truly want it. I do. For the first time in decades, I want something beyond business success. I want a real family. I want to get to know my daughter. I want to win back my marriage. I want to meet my grandson when he's born and be present in his life. Elizabeth smiled and kissed her husband softly. Then let's do it together. Rebuild, relearn, rediscover each other. They went downstairs to breakfast together. Sarah and Michael were already there, talking quietly. When they saw William and Elizabeth, they fell silent, clearly having been interrupted in the middle of something private. "Sorry," William said. "Didn't mean to intrude." "You weren't intruding," Sarah assured him. "I was just telling Michael about when I was little and you used to take me to watch the buildings going up. Remember that?" William was surprised. He did remember. He used to do that in the early years before he became completely consumed by work. "You liked watching the workers," he recalled. "You were fascinated by the machinery, and you would explain every stage of the construction. How the buildings were raised, how the foundation worked, everything. I loved those outings." "I loved them too," William admitted. "I don't know why we stopped." "Because you got too busy." "But I remember, Dad. I remember when you had time, when you were happier." The words stung, but they were true. William had been happier in those early years, before the weight of responsibility and the relentless pursuit of more and more success drained away all the joy. "We can start again," he said. "Those outings. Maybe with the baby when he or she is born. Start new traditions." "I would love that." Sarah smiled. They had coffee together, and William noticed small things he had never paid attention to before. How Sarah liked honey instead of sugar in her coffee. How Elizabeth read the newspaper from the last page to the first. How Michael ate slowly, savoring every bite as if it were precious. After coffee, as promised, they went to visit Michael's mother. William drove himself, something he hadn't done in years. Elizabeth sat beside him and Sarah and Michael were in the back. The neighborhood where Michael's mother lived was simple. Small houses close together, streets without much car traffic. Children played on the sidewalk. Neighbors chatted at their gates. It was a completely different world from what William knew. "It's right there," Michael pointed to a small but well-kept house, painted light yellow. They parked and got out. Michael knocked on the door, nervous. A woman opened it, short, grey hair pinned up in a bun, brown eyes just like her son's. She was around 60, her face marked by a hard life, but with a warm smile. "Michael!" she exclaimed, hugging her son. Then she saw Sarah and stopped. "Sarah, are you okay? Your son was out of his mind with worry." "I'm fine, Mrs. Mary." Sarah hugged the woman. "I'm so sorry for worrying Michael. I was needing some time." Then Mary saw William and Elizabeth. Her face went pale. "Mr. Harrison, ma'am." She wiped her hands nervously on her apron. "Sorry the house isn't tidy. If I'd known you were coming." "Mrs. Mary," William interrupted gently, "we didn't come to inspect your home. We came to get to know you, to meet the woman who raised the man my daughter loves." Mary blinked, surprised. Then her eyes filled with tears. "Please come in. I'll make some coffee." The house was small, but clean and welcoming. Old furniture, but well cared for. Photos of Michael at various ages on the walls. A sofa with handmade crochet covers. William looked around, seeing a whole lifetime of hard work and love condensed into that modest space. They sat in the small living room while Mary prepared coffee in the kitchen. Michael went to help her, leaving William, Elizabeth, and Sarah alone. "It's lovely here," Elizabeth commented, looking at the photos on the wall. "Every picture tells a story." Sarah got up and walked over to the photos. Michael as a baby, Michael as a child in a school uniform, Michael as a teenager receiving some kind of certificate, Michael graduating from high school. In every photo, even the oldest ones, Mary stood beside her son, smiling proudly. "She raised him all on her own," Sarah said softly. "Their father left when Michael was 3. He never came back, never sent any money. Mrs. Mary worked double shifts for years to give him an education." William looked at the photos with new respect. Mary had done with so much less what he hadn't been able to do with all his millions of dollars. She had been present. She had loved unconditionally. She had sacrificed herself without expecting anything in return. Mary returned with a tray, simple but carefully arranged cups. Michael was carrying a cake she must have made that morning. "It's nothing special," she apologized as she served, "but it's made with love." William tasted the cake. It was simple, a cornmeal cake, but delicious in a way that the expensive cakes from renowned bakeries never were. "It's delicious," he said honestly. Mary smiled, relaxing a little. Michael always liked this cake. I make it every week for him. Mrs. Mary, William began. I wanted to talk about Michael and Sarah. Mary's face grew serious. She braced herself for whatever was to come. I know my son isn't rich. He doesn't come from an important family. But he's a good young man, Mr. Harrison. Honest, hard-working, he truly loves your daughter. Not for the money, but for who she is. I know, William said, surprising Mary. And I want you to know that I support their relationship. It wasn't always that way. Just yesterday I was ready to separate them, to use my power and influence to push Michael away. But I realized I would be making the same mistake my father made with me. Mary looked at Sarah, then at Michael, then back at William. Are you serious? Completely. More than that, I want you to know that you're going to be the grandmother of my grandchild, and that makes you part of my family too. Mary began to cry, covering her face with her hands. Michael knelt beside his mother, hugging her. Mom, everything's fine. This is good news. I know, Mary said between sobs. I always feared this day. The day you'd fall in love with someone above our station, and I'd lose you. You'll never lose me, Mom, Michael assured her. Never. William felt a tightness in his chest. Mary had so little materially, but she had her son's complete love, while William, with all his wealth, had almost lost Sarah forever. Mrs. Mary, Elizabeth joined the conversation. I hope you can teach me a few things about being a mother, about truly being present. You did a wonderful job with Michael. Mary wiped her eyes, still emotional. I only did what any mother would do. No, Elizabeth shook her head. You did more. Much more. And I admire that. They spent the morning talking. Mary told stories of Michael as a child, mischievous but affectionate. Michael told about how his mother worked during the day as a seamstress and at night cleaned offices to pay for his tutoring. William listened in silence, learning about true sacrifice. Before they left, William did something that surprised everyone. Mrs. Mary, do you still work as a seamstress? Yes, sir. I work from home. I do alterations. I sew clothes for the neighbors. It's not much, but it's what I know how to do. And what if I offered you a job? Supervising the seamstresses who make the uniforms for the employees of my hotels. It would be a job with a fixed salary, benefits, and a retirement plan. Mary was speechless. Sir, I don't have a formal education. I don't know if I'd be suitable for... You have decades of experience. You know quality. You know the hard work that goes into every piece. You're exactly the kind of person I need. Someone who will make sure our employees have well-made, comfortable uniforms. Dad, Sarah smiled. That's wonderful. When can I start? Mary asked, still in shock. Whenever you want. Monday, Tuesday. You decide. Monday works great. Mr. Harrison, I don't know how to thank you. No need to thank me. Just do the good work I know you're capable of. When they left Mary's house, William felt lighter. Doing something good, without expecting anything in return, was a feeling he had forgotten. On the way back, his phone rang. It was his lawyer again. William, the situation has escalated. Richard Sterling gave interviews to 3 major newspapers. He's saying that Sarah is unstable, that the romance with the driver is just rebellion, that she's in no condition to make decisions. He's painting you as negligent. William felt the anger return. He can't do this. He already did. The stories come out tomorrow. We need a response fast. Then we'll give one. He'll schedule a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. I'll speak personally. William, are you sure? Speaking publicly could... No, it can't. My daughter won't be defamed. Prepare everything. When he hung up, Elizabeth and Sarah were looking at him with concern. Press conference? Elizabeth asked. I'm going to tell our side. I'll make it clear that I support Sarah's choices, that she is perfectly capable of deciding her own future. Dad, you don't have to do this, Sarah said. I can handle what people say. But you shouldn't have to, not when I can do something about it. Back at the mansion, William spent the rest of the day preparing what he would say. Elizabeth helped him, offering a perspective he wouldn't have had on his own. Sarah was nervous. worried about the public exposure. Michael, who was now officially living with them, tried to calm her down. "It'll all work out," he would say. "Your father knows what he's doing." "I don't know if I do," William admitted when he heard. "But I'll try for you, Sarah, for our family." The next morning the headlines were exactly as the lawyer had warned. Photos of Sarah, speculation about her mental health, insinuations that Michael was a gold digger. It was cruel and unfair. William read every article, his anger growing, but also his determination. In the afternoon, he was in the auditorium of the main hotel, dozens of journalists waiting. Elizabeth and Sarah were backstage, nervous. Michael had stayed home, agreeing that his presence could complicate things further. William stepped up to the podium. Camera flashes went off. Microphones were thrust forward. He took a deep breath and began. "Good afternoon. My name is William Harrison, and I came here to talk about my daughter, Sarah Harrison. You've read things about her over the past few days. Speculation, lies, attacks on her character, and I will not allow that to continue." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Sarah is not unstable. She is brave. Brave enough to make difficult choices, to follow her heart even knowing she would be judged, to stand up for what she believes is right. And I am proud of her." Hands began to rise, journalists wanting to ask questions, but William raised his hand, asking for silence. "I will answer questions, but first I need to say something. As a father, I failed. I spent years focused on business, on building an empire, on securing a financial future for my family. But in the process, I forgot to build real connections. I forgot to be present. I forgot that my daughter needed a father, not a businessman." The cameras kept clicking. William saw some journalists surprised by the raw honesty. "Sarah made decisions I didn't plan. She chose a path I didn't initially approve of. But you know what? She had the right to do that. She is not a piece in a business game. She is a person with feelings, dreams, and the right to her own life. And if I took too long to realize that, the fault is mine, not hers." "Mr. Harrison," a journalist shouted, "is it true she's pregnant by a driver?" William looked directly at the camera. "Yes, Sarah is pregnant, and I'm going to be a grandfather. The baby's father is Michael Turner, a hard-working, honest young man whom my daughter loves, and whom I have learned to respect. He isn't defined by his profession. He's defined by his character, and he has more character than many wealthy men I know." "And what about the engagement to James Sterling?" "It's been called off, because Sarah realized she was in a relationship that didn't make her happy, and she had the courage to walk away before it was too late, something I wish I had taught her, but she learned on her own." "Are you worried about the market's reaction, about the company's image?" William smiled without humor. "6 months ago, that would have been my first concern. But now? No. My concern is my daughter's happiness, the well-being of my future grandchild, rebuilding my family. If the market has a problem with that, then the market has its priorities wrong." There was a moment of surprised silence. Then the questions began to pour out, every journalist wanting details, wanting more. William answered what he could, always coming back to the main point. Sarah deserved respect, she deserved support, and he was going to give her that publicly. When the press conference ended, William left the stage exhausted but relieved. Elizabeth hugged him backstage. "You were incredible," she said. "I was honest. For the first time in years, I was completely honest." Sarah had tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Dad, for defending me, for being on my side. I will always be on your side. Even when I disagree with you, even when I don't understand, I'll be here. That's my promise." In the following days, the reaction was mixed. Some praised William for his honesty and support of his daughter. Others criticized him for being weak, for allowing Sarah to ruin a good business deal. But William discovered he didn't care as much about opinions as he used to. The Sterling's lawsuit continued, but William's lawyer was confident he could resolve it without major losses. James, surprisingly, gave an interview of his own a few days later, admitting that his relationship with Sarah had never been based on true love. "I cared about her," he said, But it was more admiration, convenience. It wasn't the kind of love that sustains a marriage. Sarah was brave to realize that before I did. It was a gesture of maturity that William hadn't expected. Maybe James wasn't as bad as he seemed. Just another young man being pressured by family expectations. The weeks passed. William kept his promise to be more present. He cancelled unnecessary trips, delegated more responsibilities, came home in time for family dinner. He wasn't perfect. Sometimes he fell back into old habits, but Elizabeth and Sarah corrected him when that happened. Michael started working at the office. He proved to be intelligent and dedicated, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. William enjoyed mentoring him, something he had never done with anyone before. It was rewarding to see the young man grow professionally. Mary had accepted the job and was doing very well. The seamstresses adored her, and the quality of the uniforms had visibly improved. William visited her occasionally, talking about work but also about life. He learned from her simple wisdom, from her perspective as someone who knew real struggle. Martha received the raise and the promised benefits. She cried when William told her, insisting it wasn't necessary. But he insisted even more. It was more than necessary, it was deserved. Sarah's pregnancy was progressing. She and Michael started taking parenting classes. William and Elizabeth went along to some of them, wanting to better understand how they could help. It was strange to be in a room with much younger couples, but it was also humbling in a good way. In one of those classes, the instructor asked each couple to share their fears about parenthood. When it was Sarah and Michael's turn, Sarah talked about being afraid of repeating the same mistakes her parents had made. It hurt to hear, but it was true. After class, William asked to speak with her privately. "Sarah, about what you said back there." "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to—" "No, you were right. And I want you to learn from my mistakes. Don't repeat them. Be different. Be better." "How do I do that?" "Be present. Even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when it seems like there are 1,000 other more important things. There aren't. Your child is going to be the most important thing. And the early years go by fast. Don't waste them like I wasted them." Sarah hugged her father. "You're here now, that counts. It counts, but it doesn't erase the lost years, and I'm going to have to live with that. But I can make sure your child doesn't grow up feeling what you felt. He's going to have a grandfather who's present, that I promise." 2 months later, Sarah and Michael got married. It wasn't the grand ceremony that a wedding with James would have been. It was something small, intimate, just close family and dear friends. Martha was there, sitting in the front row, the second mother she had always been to Sarah. Mary looked beautiful, wearing a dress she had sewn herself. William walked Sarah down the makeshift aisle in the mansion's garden. She was radiant, 6 months pregnant, happy in a way he had never seen before. "Ready?" he asked before they began to walk. "More than ready. Thank you, Dad. For everything. For changing. For trying. For being here. No, Sarah, thank you. For not giving up on me. For giving me a chance to be better." They walked together. William handed his daughter to Michael, but not with sorrow. It was with genuine joy, seeing the love in the young man's eyes, knowing Sarah was in good hands. During the vows, both Sarah and Michael cried. William cried too, as did Elizabeth, Mary, and Martha. They were tears of happiness, of relief, of hope. At the small celebration that followed, William gave a speech. "I spent a lot of my life thinking I knew what was best for everyone, controlling, planning, deciding, and I nearly lost everything that truly mattered in the process. My daughter taught me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let go. Trust. Support even when we don't fully understand. Michael, you weren't what I had planned for my daughter, but you are exactly what she needed. Someone who loves her for who she is, not for what she represents. Welcome to the family." Applause filled the garden. Michael, emotional, hugged William. It was an awkward hug, but a genuine one. The following months were a mix of preparation and anticipation. The baby's room was set up, not in the Harrison mansion, but in the apartment Sarah and Michael had rented. It was small, just 2 bedrooms, but it was theirs. William offered to buy something bigger, but Sarah declined. "Dad, we need to do this our own way, build our own life, but you can visit whenever you want." And he did visit. He helped assemble the crib, painted the baby's room wall a soft yellow, took part in the decorating decisions. Simple things he had never done with Sarah because he had always been too busy. Elizabeth and Mary became unlikely friends. They came from completely different worlds, but they shared a love for their children and the joy of the grandchild on the way. They often had tea together, planning how they would spoil the child with love. One night, 3 weeks before the expected due date, William's phone rang at 2 in the morning. It was Michael, nervous. "Mr. Harrison, sorry to call so late. But Sarah, I think it's time. She's having contractions." William woke Elizabeth in seconds. They dressed quickly and drove to the hospital. They called Mary on the way, picking her up at her house. At the hospital, they found Michael in the hallway, pacing back and forth. "How is she?" William asked. "Nervous, in pain, but okay. The doctors said it'll still be a while. First-time babies take time." They waited together. Hours passed. William held Elizabeth's hand, vaguely remembering when Sarah was born. He had been there, but not really present. He was worried about a merger that was happening, making calls from the hospital hallway. This time, he put his phone away. There was nothing more important than that moment. Martha arrived early in the morning, bringing coffee and sandwiches for everyone. She wasn't family on paper, but she was in her heart. Finally, after 14 hours of labor, Michael came out of the room with tears streaming down his face. "It's a boy. Mother and baby are doing well." William felt his heart nearly burst with joy. A grandson. He had a grandson. They let Michael go in first by himself. Then it was Elizabeth's, Mary's and Martha's turn. Finally, they called William in. Sarah was in bed, exhausted but radiant. And in her arms, a small bundle. The baby had a head full of dark hair, eyes still closed, rosy cheeks. "Dad," Sarah said softly, "do you want to meet your grandson? This is Thomas. Thomas William." William felt the tears falling freely. She had given him her father's name. After everything, after all his mistakes, she still honored him this way. "Can I hold him?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Of course." Sarah carefully placed the baby in William's arms. Little Thomas stirred, opening his eyes slightly. They were dark eyes, still unfocused, but they seemed to look directly at his grandfather. "Hi, Thomas," William whispered. "I'm your grandfather, and I promise you right now that I'm going to be present in your life. I'm going to take you to see buildings being constructed. I'm going to teach you about architecture, even though I never became an architect. I'll be at your birthdays, at your school performances, at every moment your father and mother allow. You're not going to grow up wondering if your grandfather loves you. You're going to know without a doubt." The baby yawned, indifferent to the solemn speech. But William smiled through his tears. It was a beginning, a chance to do things differently, a chance to be the grandfather he hadn't been as a father. Michael was by Sarah's side, his arm around her. William looked at the young couple, at the obvious love between them, and felt gratitude. Gratitude that Sarah had the courage to follow her heart. Gratitude that Michael was the man he was. Gratitude for a second chance. In the weeks that followed, William discovered a joy he didn't know existed. Being a grandfather was different from being a father. There was less pressure, fewer expectations, just pure love. He visited Sarah and Michael almost every day, helping where he could, just holding Thomas whenever they let him. One afternoon, he had Thomas in his arms while Sarah rested. The baby looked at him with those big eyes, still trying to understand the world. William began to hum a song his own mother used to sing, a memory buried for decades. Elizabeth walked into the room and stopped, watching the scene. Her husband, the tough businessman, humming to a baby with an expression of pure joy. "You're good at this," she said softly. "I wish I had been good at this 24 years ago. But you weren't, and you spent years regretting it. But now you're doing things differently. Thomas is going to grow up knowing he is loved. And Sarah finally has the father she always wanted." William looked at his wife. "And you? Do you have the husband you deserve?" Elizabeth sat down beside him. I'm getting him. Little by little, I'm getting back the man I married. And it's a gift I no longer expected to receive. I love you, William said. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I always have. I just forgot to show it. I love you too, and I'm proud of you, of how you've changed, of how you're trying. They stayed there, the two of them, with their grandson between them, a family rebuilding itself. Months passed. Thomas grew, began to smile, to babble. William was present for every milestone, every development. He took photos, sent them to everyone, the proud and present grandfather he had promised to be. At the office, things had also changed. William no longer worked 12 hours a day. He delegated more, trusted his team, and surprisingly, the business didn't crumble. In fact, it thrived. Employees who once feared him began to respect him in a different way. He was more approachable, more human. Michael also grew in the company. He proved to have a talent for negotiations, a natural ability to read people. William began to train him seriously, seeing in him a possible successor, not because he was married to Sarah, but because he was genuinely good. Sarah returned to work after a few months, but not in the family business. She set up a non-profit organization helping young single mothers. William funded the initial project, but Sarah made a point of seeking other investors, wanting it to be sustainable on its own. Martha finally retired at 65. William organized a surprise party at the Royal Continental in the Imperial Ballroom. Hundreds of employees came to honor her. Sarah gave an emotional speech about how Martha had been a second mother. William gave another, thanking her for her dedication and, most importantly, for saving his family. At the end of the party, William gifted Martha with the deed to an apartment. She tried to refuse, but he insisted. You spent 3 decades taking care of my family, Martha. It's the least I can do, and it's not charity. It's gratitude. It's recognition. It's fairness. Martha cried, hugging William, and he returned the hug, this man who had finally learned to express affection. A year after Thomas's birth, on his birthday, William organized a party in the mansion's garden. There was cake, balloons, relatives, and friends. It was a simple celebration, but full of love. During the party, William stepped away for a moment, watching everything from afar. Sarah laughed as Thomas tried to eat cake with his hands. Michael was beside her, attentive and affectionate. Elizabeth chatted animatedly with Mary. Martha held Thomas, making funny faces that made the baby laugh out loud. This was it. This was what mattered. Not the millions of dollars in the bank, not the buildings with his name, not the awards and recognition, but these moments, these connections, this love. Elizabeth joined him. What are you thinking about? About how I almost lost all of this, about how I was so blind for so long. But you didn't lose it. You woke up in time. Barely. If it hadn't been for Martha in that hallway, blocking the door, I would have stormed in furiously. I would have said terrible things. I would have pushed Sarah away forever. But she gave you a chance to stop and think, and you took that chance. That's what matters. William looked at his wife, this strong and wise woman who had been by his side for nearly 3 decades. Have you ever thought about going back to practicing law? Elizabeth seemed surprised by the question. Why? After so many years away? Because you were good at it. Because you loved it. Because you gave it up for me to be the perfect wife. And I should never have let you do that. William, I'm serious. If you want to go back, I support you completely. We can hire someone to help around the house. We can rearrange things, whatever you need. Elizabeth went silent, processing. I'll think about it. It's been so long, but maybe it's time to rediscover that part of me too. Do it. Rediscover who you used to be, who you are beyond wife and mother. You deserve it. They walked back to the party holding hands. Thomas, seeing his grandfather, reached out his little arms, wanting to be held. William picked him up, making the boy laugh as he lifted him in the air. Careful with my back, he joked, but he was smiling. The party went on until sunset. When everyone had already left, the immediate family stayed. William, Elizabeth, Sarah, Michael and Thomas. They sat in the garden, just talking, laughing, existing together. "Dad," Sarah said during a moment of silence, "thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For changing. For being here. For being the father I always wanted you to be. I should be the one thanking you, for not giving up on me, for giving me this chance." Thomas was almost asleep in William's arms. The baby had an expression of absolute peace, completely trusting of the grandfather holding him. "You know," William said thoughtfully, "I spent my entire life building things. Buildings, companies, fortunes. I thought that was my legacy. But looking at Thomas now, I realize I was wrong. He is my legacy. And the chance to be better, to do things differently this time, that is my true achievement." "You're being a wonderful grandfather," Elizabeth said, "and a better father, and a husband I haven't seen in a long time. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm trying." "That's all we ask," Sarah smiled. "That you try, that you're here, that you're real with us." Michael, who had been quiet for a while, finally spoke. "Mr. Harrison, Michael," William interrupted him. "William, you're my son-in-law, the father of my grandson. Call me William. Or if you prefer, you can call me Dad too. You're part of this family." Michael was moved. He looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for accepting me, for giving me opportunities, for trusting me with your daughter and grandson. You earned all of this, Michael, with your character, your hard work, your love for Sarah. I just finally opened my eyes to see it." Night had fully fallen. Stars began to appear in the clear sky. Thomas was sleeping deeply, and there in that garden, that imperfect but real family found peace. It wasn't the end of the challenges. There would be more obstacles, more difficult moments, more lessons ahead. But they would face them together as a real family. William looked around, seeing the people he loved. Elizabeth, his companion of decades. Sarah, his daughter who had taught him about courage. Michael, the son-in-law who had taught him about humility. And Thomas, the grandson who had given him a second chance. It was more than he deserved, but it was exactly what he needed. And for the first time in decades, William Harrison felt complete. Not because of money, not because of power, not because of business success, but because of love, because of the simple, complicated, wonderful love of a family he had nearly lost, but managed to save. Months turned into years. Thomas grew, learned to walk, to talk. His first words were, "Grandpa," something that filled William with pride. The boy loved spending time with his grandfather, especially when William took him to see construction sites, keeping the promise made on the day he was born. Elizabeth did indeed return to practicing law, starting slowly with pro bono cases. She discovered she still had the passion, the skill. William supported her every step of the way, proud to see her shine again. Sarah expanded her organization. Now she helped hundreds of young mothers, offering support, training, hope. It was the work she had always dreamed of doing, and William could see how fulfilled she was. Michael became vice president of one of the company's divisions. He proved to be a natural leader, respected by employees, skilled in business. William saw him as the son he never had, the successor he had chosen not by blood, but by merit. And William kept changing, growing. Some days were harder than others. Some days the old urge to control everything came back. But Elizabeth and Sarah always reminded him, gently but firmly, to be better. He started drawing again, something he hadn't done in 40 years. They were simple drawings at first, imaginary buildings, but little by little the passion returned. He even designed a small country house for the family, which Michael and a team built together. It was a different life from the one he had planned, but it was infinitely better. On a Sunday afternoon, years after that crucial day in room 28, William was at the park with Thomas, now a clever 4-year-old boy. They were feeding ducks at the lake while chatting about everything and nothing. "Grandpa," Thomas asked with the innocent curiosity of children, "were you happy when you were younger?" William thought about the question. You know, Thomas, I thought I was. I had a lot of money, a lot of things, but I didn't have what really matters. What matters, Grandpa? You, your mother, your father, Grandma, love, family, moments like this, feeding ducks with my grandson. Thomas smiled, then threw more bread to the ducks. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, Thomas, more than words can say. And there, in that simple moment, William finally understood what had always been true. It wasn't about what you built or how much you accumulated. It was about who you loved and who loved you back. It was about being present, being real, being human. Martha was right that day in the hallway. If he had stormed into that room in anger, everything would have been different. But she had made him stop, made him think, given him the time to become the man he needed to be. That blocked door wasn't a barrier. It was an opportunity, a chance to choose differently, a chance to save not just Sarah, but himself. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this journey? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and how you felt about the story of William, Sarah, and the whole family. Do you think William made the right choices? What would you have done in his place? We'd love to read your honest opinion. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories like this one. Thank you so much for your company on this story.